but not exactly like. So, what do you think is the right way to approach like a man that say is struggling with some mental health issue?
I think that men have a tough time kind of feeling understood sometimes because of these social pressures of the need to always be strong, or you cannot show emotion because somehow that's weak or whatever. I think that a lot of it comes down to, first of all, just undoing those kind of societal pressures. Like, so a little bit of backstory, I will let the stream know. You're actually friends with my younger brother.
Yeah.
And he asked me to talk to you about like gender stuff, and we already had one conversation like a month or two ago, and it was just like a private combo. We just talked over Discord. Um, but you wanted to talk more about the gender stuff, I believe.
It was more about the I guess like the masculinity stuff. So I had just to give a little bit more backstory. I hadn't really heard of the stuff you were talking about. It's just when I talked about it with your younger brother, he kind of said like I basically disagreed with most of the stuff you said, which I think we found some common ground when we talked. So I kind of disagree with that, but I did look into some of your other stuff, and I guess the one thing that I like, the one debate I actually like really fully watched was I guess um, your debate, I guess, like on modern day masculinity. I'm not sure who it was with exactly. I just did see that you were talking with someone about it. So if you could like refresh me a little bit, could you like talk about, I guess, your views on, um, I guess, men today, oh, and give like, I guess, and a lot of your argument I remember from last time was kind of like social pressures that are put on us. Um,
Hmm.
so what do you think like these modern day pressures are on men today? If I could just get your take on that.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of pressure on men that in order to be a man, um,
Hmm.
you have to reduce your emotions substantially. I
Hmm.
think that there is a lot of pressure on men to be the provider. I think that they're oftentimes seen as less of a man if they're not providing financially, when I would say there's multiple different ways to provide for a family. It's not just financial provision.
Yeah.
Um, there's the whole thing about like you must be strong, you must be tough no matter what. The whole like don't
Yeah.
cry like a girl type thing. Um,
Yeah.
there's a lot there, and I kind of have a feeling that the more we talk about it, the more like it'll just kind of come up. But off the top of my head, that is definitely what I think of when I think of like these unhealthy pressures placed on men.
Yeah. So like specifically I guess so it's more of like a mental health kind of thing, like kind of suppress all of that and don't really pay attention to that. You're is what you're kind of saying?
Like a lot of the times, yeah, it's not so much that it's like repressed, but it's just that that's the way that men are socialized more often than not, which is just, there are certain things that are manly and there are certain things that are
Mhm.
girly, and if you do those things that are girly, then that somehow makes you less of a man, or makes you weaker, or makes you, I mean, and that kind of ranges all over. There are some people that would just be like, their dad, like there are definitely people with some situations where their fathers will literally beat them if they
Mhm.
are acting like a woman. They got to toughen them up a little bit, kind of shit. And then there's other people where it's a lot more subtle. It's just a lot more like, oh, you're a little boy. Are you excited to get a job and take care of the family? Like there's all sorts of different ways in which that is sort of instilled in people.
Mhm. So do you think it's important to set these kinds of standards? I guess ones that you would consider personally good, to encourage in men, or do you think it's important to kind of, I guess, have almost like no standards in a way? Or what is your take on that, I'd say?
I mean, if we're talking about like gender roles and gender
Okay.
expressions, long-term goal would probably be to, because everybody's still going to have certain standards and ideas and personalities, of course. But
Mhm.
the thing that I would like to see less of is considering things manly or womanly.
Okay.
Now, of course, having a period would probably be seen more womanly, no matter what. But I mean, just
Mhm.
like
No, yeah.
more
So like
this.
biological. So you're saying like there's a separate between the biological and the social.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Hmm. So kind of my take on this, and I kind of like agree and disagree a little bit. Especially with like the suppression of emotion, right?
Hmm.
Um, I think mental health, at least, is kind of like a pillar in your life that I guess it's a building block essentially, right?
Yeah.
You it's very difficult to improve other areas of your life if you struggle with things like trauma, depression, these kinds of things.
Right.
And especially in men, I will say that like men that have become addicted, like for example, addicts, right? A lot of addicts are, I guess, trying to get out of something, right? They're trying to escape some kind of emotion
Hmm.
from a mental health standpoint, right? And I will agree with you the fact that like I think it's pretty bad to tell a man, well, simply just suppress this emotion, right? Don't think about this because obviously we've seen what happens, right? These men become addicted to these kinds of things. They become like very disorderly. Their lives sort of fall apart in a way.
Right.
Um, but the way I think we should be encouraging this is promoting like good mental health standards, teaching men how we should feel like and take upon these emotions. But not exactly like. So, what do you think is the right way to approach like a man that say is struggling with some mental health issue?
I think that men have a tough time kind of feeling understood sometimes because of these social pressures of the need to always be strong, or you cannot show emotion because somehow that's weak or whatever. I think that a lot of it comes down to, first of all, just undoing those kind of societal pressures. Like, men and women both have emotions, they both have feelings, and this idea that if one person shows emotion who happens to have a penis, that somehow is lame, that's just
Mhm.
very arbitrary and very stupid. And like you said,
Right.
yeah, very bad for mental health. How I
Mhm.
would go about like addressing this for an individual person, if
Mm.
there was like a dude who was like my friend and was like, man, I'm really going through shit, like I would just talk to them. I'd just listen to them, kind of the
Mhm.
same way you probably would with any friend of yours that's going through shit.
Mhm.
It's not so much like an interpersonal thing. Sometimes it is, but a lot of the times, again, it kind of comes back to these societal expectations that really revolve around gender, these gendered expectations and gendered roles.
Mhm. So I kind of want to like take a look at like some biology, obviously, like right. Um, to get like say one example, like you said, it's like to say that it's more womanly to express emotion. Um, do you think that it is kind of in a way? Because I guess like like from a study perspective, I guess it is more likely for women to express emotions about their like a certain situation.
Well, it's probably is more likely, but
So
why do you think that
do you think
is,
this
right?
stems do you think this stems from a biological perspective? I guess you see I'm not like very well versed on the studies and I'd really like to I guess become take a look more into it is can we actually distinguish this from a biological perspective if you say that we have like these societal claims in
Yeah.
place?
Yeah, we absolutely can as far as the emotion stuff. So, I mean, for example, if I'm not sure what study you're referencing, but if there, I wouldn't be surprised if a study existed showing that women are more likely to show emotion, because
Mhm.
again, that's how they're socialized and how they're raised is
Okay.
to, you are a woman, it's acceptable for you to cry, for you to be emotional, for you to be sad, and oftentimes keep in mind it's the almost the other way around for women, right? Where now it's you're a woman, you're more emotional, you're less rational, that kind of crap. But there are studies already that show that men and women experience the same degree of emotions. Really, the only difference is that the way in which they like feel empathy, or the way they react to empathy, can be different between the two. But again, the study that I looked at attributed it largely to social roles because,
Mhm.
as we talked about last time, the way you're raised literally shapes your biology.
For
So
sure, for sure.
so if you're raised from a very young age that, like, showing emotion, showing empathy is a womanly weakling thing to do, then I wouldn't be surprised that adult men react to empathy differently than women because that's how they were socialized all their life.
And so, do you think there is even a way, um, I guess, to measure these biological, like, I guess, if these social standards have become so ingrained in us, is there even a way to, I guess, measure these types of biological factors at the end of the day?
Um, I'm not sure what you mean. Like the study that I was just
Mhm.
referencing, it
Yeah,
just looked at how men and women sort of experience emotion, and they both experience emotion at the same rates. That just the way that they react to it is different. So,
gotcha.
I mean, to be honest, I don't think it's that important to distinguish, like pick out the perfect line between where is the exact line between biology and gender. It's what it really comes down to is what can we change, right?
Okay.
Obviously, if you've been raised a certain way all your life, then that's going to also inform your biology. But once that happens, it's going to be pretty hard to change your biology any further, right? So
Mhm.
rather than like trying to find that line, I would just what I do is I just focus on the social elements, especially because it's pretty conclusive that a lot of these expectations placed on men and masculinity do nothing but harm men in the long term.
Hmm. So I will say, like for me personally, I've been sort of subject to that kind of stuff. Kind of like saying, like you said, along the lines of suppressing emotions. But I think it's a little bit different for men, right? It's kind of like, um, at least the way I found it, obviously, and men that I've talked to, um, sort of take their emotions and they found ways to sort of, I guess, obviously, like by emotions, like emotional trauma, things like this, depression, um, and deal with them sort of like on their own. And like, I understand what you're saying with like, obviously, like you should have like outreaches to people, right? Because it's like, it's important to have outreaches to people, and I think that, um, I think that if you don't have outreaches to people when you're dealing with this type of issue, right? You have obviously no idea how to deal with them. But at the end of the day, it's like it's kind of like the Bildungsroman of a man, right? In a way, like so. Do you think there's certain like moral progressions for men, or where do you think like men should find their purpose in a way? Is what I'm saying.
I mean, I think that purpose and, well, what we're talking about right now is toxic masculinity. So I think that purpose is a whole separate issue. I don't know if we need to get into that just yet. For
Okay.
me, it's more like you're right that men do need outreaches, but part of the reason that they have a hard time doing that, again, does come down to the social element. Same thing with higher rates of drug abuse amongst men, higher rates of suicide. All this can be attributed to not having healthy ways to express your emotions. And the thing is that it's more than just like, oh, I'm really depressed, so I need to talk to somebody. Like, guys have emotions on in day-to-day life too. Like, that's why a conversation I had with somebody not too long ago, I was like, obviously you should be in control of your emotions, but that's not just something that applies to men. That's something that applies to everybody. Women shouldn't be melting down, crying nonstop at work either. But if you've had a long, tough day at work or something, and you feel the need to get a little bit emotional when you get home, maybe to your partner or in private or to a friend, I don't think that should be looked down upon. Right now, it's seen as pretty weird to see a man crying.
Hmm. I see what you're saying with that. So do you think like? But what I'm saying is, do you think I suppose like expressing these emotions, I guess, is the right way of dealing about it for men? And I guess like another tangent you could take from that is obviously like we're men, so we can't exactly take to the experience of a woman. Um, do you think that men and women should deal with emotions in different ways? Obviously, because of their like biological composition.
I don't know. I wouldn't.
So yeah, I'm just asking like this out of like curiosity because you like seem a little bit more versed with the studies. Like, do you know
I mean, I
if there?
wouldn't say based on biology that men and women should be expressing emotion differently. No, I don't. I think that that's kind of already what we have right now, which has been, as demonstrated, very problematic for the mental health of men, and it also leads to some sexism against women too. Don't get me wrong. I mean, like I referenced earlier, there are people that unironically believe that like women are meant to be emotional and men are the ones who are meant to be rational or some shit like that, which is also not borne out by any of the data. I wouldn't be comfortable making any prescriptive claims saying like, okay, you're a man, you have this biology, therefore you should express emotion this way. I think that I would be willing to make a broad prescriptive claim in regards to all people, and I think that all people should find healthy ways to cope and deal with their emotions that doesn't involve drug abuse or something that leads to a harm for them down the line. But I don't think there's anything that needs to be different between men and women there.
Okay. Um. Then let me ask. I was sorry, I blanked out. I was about to say.
That's fine.
Um. Ooh.
We were going to talk about men's purpose at one point or another too.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of. I think it had to do with that. Oh my gosh.
It's
Um.
okay. It happens. It happens to me too. Um, but yeah, I
Oh
just
yeah.
think
Oh
that,
yeah. Yeah. I was gonna ask.
okay.
when it comes to like these issues that men are dealing with, right? You say men are more likely to, obviously they're more likely to go in jail. Most people in jail are men. Most people that commit suicide, I guess, are men. Most people that are addicted to drugs are men, obviously.
Mm.
Um, Besides these social norms that we're having, kind of like some of the research I've done or looked at, and I guess just observationally, I can observe some of these things. Do you think that like fatherlessness, and I'll get into like some of the other issues, but do you think that fatherlessness is an important issue when it comes to these men struggling with their mental health?
I mean, of course, yeah, fatherlessness can definitely play a role. There's plenty of studies already indicating that not having a dad is a pretty bad thing for a child. Um, but I think that some of the fatherlessness thing could even be explained by the toxic masculinity approach that I'm taking. So, why do fathers leave their families? The number one reason why is because they feel inadequate. And so, had they been able to better express their emotions, had they been ever able to better articulate what they were really feeling, is it possible that could have led to a better outcome for that guy? Would he have maybe stuck around rather than running away? That's not like a guarantee, but if we just look at the top reason why fathers leave, I think that a lot of that could be fixed by creating an environment that is more acceptable and open to just hearing men out with how they're feeling and accepting the fact that we're all human, we all have emotions, we all have feelings, and it's okay to express those sometimes.
So when you mean like an inadequate father, do you mean that one like that fails to find purpose in a way?
I don't know if it's because they fail to find purpose. I think that what it's talking about is being inadequate in regards to your ability as a father. Um, but I mean, I'd have to look into that again. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, it could also be, yeah, maybe they do feel as though they have a lack of purpose, but I'm not sure how the purpose thing, like how. I guess for me, I'm thinking about this from a proactive approach, which is like,
Mhm.
okay, if right now there's societal expectations placed on men that says they can't be emotional and this is leading to all these problems, why don't we fix that? I don't know how we would fix
But
like
yeah, so like
men
my
not
approach
having
is
a
like obviously
purpose.
there is some difficult like I guess um it's like a multitude of factors is what I'm basically saying. Not just the I guess those societal pressures, along with the fact that and I'll get into some of these. So like I said, fatherlessness, I think another one, like right, we don't talk about issues like motherlessness. The rate is extremely much less than the rate of fatherlessness.
Right.
Um there's also things like even in school, right? You're forced like from the beginning of I guess age, the majority of America's youth are enrolled in public schools, right? And like I don't like again from like a biological standpoint, men are going to be, I guess, more likely to like move, I guess, and we're like a little bit more patient in a way. They're able to sit longer. Um,
Than women?
what'd you say? Your mic cut out.
They're able to sit longer than women? I
Are you
would have
saying men?
assumed it'd be the other way around
Yeah,
since.
yeah, that's what I said. Like women are able to sit longer and
Okay.
still for men, right? And we place these men in like this position where they have to sit for 7 hours a day, um, not able to most of the time not able to go outside. Maybe in elementary school you get some recess, right? High school, middle school, at least in my experience, didn't have recess.
You didn't
Um,
have recess? Shit.
no,
That's
yeah,
definitely
they took it
unusual.
away. Yeah, they took it away in middle school. Yet again, this is from my experience. Like, obviously, we can look at this in a more of a broad term of America. Um, and another thing is like most teachers are female, right? So it's
Hmm.
like men are going into school. Statistically, there's a good amount of them, a good chunk that are without fathers. They have no real father figure. Um, and most of the time, right, they're going to seek, I guess, some type of figure. And they need some type of figure that, like, I guess, tells them how to be a good man, right? Um,
Well, yeah, of
and
course it's
I think
there.
it's,
A lot of it is, but see, like and I'm not saying this is like a gotcha or anything, but even recognizing that is in a way recognizing the way that gender is social, right? Because you have to be taught this thing. You're not. It's not just in your biology. It's not just innate.
Yeah, so we can like okay.
But what is
So that
this?
yeah.
How does this really? I'm just wondering how this relates exactly. Like, obviously, not having recess sucks, but like,
Mhm.
I'm not sure that's the main solution here.
So
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the only problem is toxic masculinity, and if we fix that, then every single thing is going to be perfect. But like, of course, there's multifaceted issues here. But I think that the top issue is the social expectations placed on men that are unhealthy for men.
but do you think that okay, so where do you think like I guess if men don't exactly are having these male figures in their lives and say so I guess I'm trying to figure out like an adequate solution to this problem, right? I mean, we can't exactly fix fatherlessness overnight. Just like you said, like it'd be very difficult to change the societal standards as well. But how do you think, I guess, through a role model, do you think, right? Because men need a role model ultimately
Hmm.
to teach them, I guess, like you said, the societal roles. How can we encourage good role models, right? Because it's very difficult, I think, for a man to learn from a woman. You know, it's like, because I think we're different at the end of the day, right? So it's like,
I mean, I
it'd
think that
be,
there are different things you can learn from both. I don't think
oh, for
that.
sure.
I mean,
No, yeah, yeah,
I argue in favor of gay adoption, for example. So I think that
yeah.
like having two parents that love you and are and stable environment
Yeah.
is going to be the best, whether that's two women, a man and a woman, or two men. Um, I mean, yeah, of course, role model's important. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say they need another man to be the role model. I
Mhm.
think that they do need someone though that is able to set them straight. But the thing is again, like same with the emotional thing. Like, does this really only apply to men? Like, don't women need somebody to look up to
But
and to
okay,
teach
so
them good
yeah, I'm
values as
just
well?
oh, for sure, absolutely. But I'm saying in like this, I guess, modern society, right? Like, it's a lot harder for men to have these kind of role models than it is for women. I'm not denying the fact. Like, I'm not trying to get like I guess put down women at all. Like, obviously, everyone, if they're going to be, I guess, good, well-standing, functioning members of society, need to learn from the good functioning members of society, right? Um, I'm just saying it is a lot more difficult for men in the modern day, at least,
But a lot of
than
that might be back to my issue originally, right? Is that like men having a really tough time expressing their feelings only translates to them being less articulate about how they're feeling, less likely to even acknowledge that they need help. That's another big problem, is that because of this socially constructed role that we place on men, there are actual studies that show that men are less likely to go to the hospital even when they need to go, because of this societal idea that you're a man, you got to do this alone, you got to be strong. So even that kind of shit, I think, would probably hinder a man from seeking out a role model, because they're kind of raised from a very early age that like you have to be the lone wolf. You got to do this all yourself. And so you might be right that men have a harder time seeking out a role model, but I feel like most of this could be fixed by addressing toxic masculinity. And again, not this isn't going to fix everything and make the world a perfect place with full of butterflies
for
and
sure.
rainbows,
Yeah,
but like
yeah.
I think it's going to do a massive benefit.
Okay. Um, so what's it called when you mean, I guess, the modern issues that face men, right? Where do you think? So if they're like obviously they have to learn from someone. You think it's like they're learning these societal norms from women, or is it just an observationalist kind of view when they go around
Yeah, I
seeing
don't think
how?
I don't think it's as cut and dry as like you are a man, that means you cannot cry, but it's more just like growing up
I don't
yes,
think.
there.
Yeah, yeah. I 100% agree with you. Like no one's saying like little kids like, "Yo, shut up! Like you're a man, don't cry." Like right. Obviously,
Right.
some people do, but it's not like the like. You think so? Is this more of like an innate psychological
It's much more of a
factor?
subtle, yes, it's much more of a subtle thing that is kind of reinforced as a man grows up. It's a lot more along those lines of
Mhm.
like having one specific person that told you can't cry. But like, I mean, even growing up for me, like there are things I look back at now and I'm like, that kind of was toxic masculinity. I can understand where like my
So,
dad was coming from,
real
but
quick, can you talk about like what does toxic masculinity mean? I'm not really familiar with that term. Like I've just I've heard it a little bit before, but like I've never had it defined. Could you?
Sure. Yeah, toxic masculinity just refers to kind of what we're talking about right now is just socially expected roles that are placed on men that end up being toxic both to the man and to people around the man. So
Okay,
there's also
and this.
studies showing that men who are raised under like traditional masculinity, as in like you're a man, you must be strong, you must be the leader, are actually more likely to abuse women.
Okay. So, um, I 100% agree with you. The fact that I guess um, there needs to be there needs to be a way for men to, I suppose, deal with their emotions, right? But I think it's important to I guess. So, what kind of standards instead of you talk about these societal standards? Um, do you think there are good standards for men, and like which standards are specifically? I guess would it be worth to promote?
I think that there are good standards to promote for people, but I'm not sure what standard would necessarily be specific for a man. Do you have any ideas? I could be
So
wrong, so just to.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, at least from what I've like seen, um, I guess, and this kind of goes back to I guess like the gender argument. We can, I guess, delve a little bit into that. I don't want to go back too much in that prior conversation. Kind of how our biological differences, kind of like, I think it's really important to take a look at biology. Obviously, socially, um, it's important to see that as well. But do you think like kind of embracing our biological potential?
I mean, I think that that's already happening a lot with like as regards to
So what do you
sports
mean?
and whatnot. Like, obviously, males have testosterone, which is
Hmm.
biology, so they're probably going to be more likely to want to play sports or be go further in sports as opposed
Yeah.
to women's sports. Um,
Hmm.
I'm just not sure what standard we would place on men on the basis of biology. Like, what would that look like?
Hmm.
Because it kind of
Yeah,
seems
yeah,
like where we're
yeah.
at right now, which has been doing a lot of harm.
Well, yeah, okay. So you see, thing is like I am disagreeing. I guess I don't. I think we're taking this sort of biological standard and misinterpreting it. No, sorry, misinterpreting it. And I kind of agree with you. It is weakening men. Um, in particular, I guess to the emotional side point of men. I think it's important, and I don't think it's talked about enough how important mental health is when it comes to men. Um, but I think it's kind of embracing their biology, right? In a way, if we can, I guess, find out the ways that are good for men, and like this, is another conversation, like
But what
how
does
can we
that
actually
mean? What does it mean to like
deal?
embrace your biology? Like again, like how would men's biology determine the expectations we place on them necessarily?
So, like you said, like for example, like men are, I guess, stronger and more likely to do sports. So, do you think that if we sort of suppress those things, I'm trying to like have a productive conversation. Like, I'm not trying to like dismiss your view, but I'm
No, it's
like
fine. Go
I want
for
to be
it.
like productive in this. Um, can we kind of promote things that men are good at so they can kind of like embrace the things that they're good at in a way, um, and maybe potentially find happiness through that?
I
Kind
mean,
of like
yeah, absolutely. But again, I'm not sure what that is on a how that fits in line with like a actual gender expectation. So, for example, like men on average are stronger than women. So, but what would the expectation be then? That you're a man, so you need to be more strong? Like that's not quite fair because then what if you have a man who is like me, who's kind of a scrawny little guy who's not very strong, right? Like, does
no,
that
yeah,
somehow
yeah,
mean
yeah.
I'm not a man? And I think in a ways that will come back around to kind of bite men in the butt and make men who aren't strong feel as though they are inadequate or they're not real men or whatever. So I
So I
mean, like
mean,
embracing who
like
you
when I say
are
like,
is a good thing to do, but that goes back again to men and women should do that.
so when I say like, I guess obviously like right, there's I guess competition with that, like who can be the strongest, whatever, things like that, right? But I'm saying, and another thing is like, I think as men, we kind of need to encourage each other to bring out like the best in ourselves. So I think it is kind of like bad when it comes to like men putting each other down because you're not strong enough, things like this.
Hmm.
But what if we changed and motivated each other to, I guess, embrace the good in us and what we are good at and sort of maximize that? Um, do you think it would be, I guess, men would become intrinsically more happier, I
It's quite
guess?
possible, but again, we're kind of back to my argument with the toxic masculinity thing because you're right that men thrive in groups. They tend to do better in groups than like one on one, and that's another reason why you'll notice like women tend to be more content talking on the phone, whereas men do better face to face in groups with other guys.
Mhm.
But there's also issues right now with men having a hard time actually building a community or making friends. That's a huge problem
Oh,
affecting
for
men again
sure.
because I mean, what are men taught, right? That you got to be able to do this on your own. You got to stand tough, stand strong no matter what kind of shit. And that
Well,
ultimately just
so
leads to more harm.
I think there's a difference between like telling men to sort of like, I guess, be able to stand their ground, but I think it's important to like acknowledge the fact that we're all men, right? We're all kind of, I guess, we're all obviously very different in like interpersonally, but we all share the fact that we're men, right? And we need to, I
But I'm
guess,
not sure what that means. Like,
what do you like that we're men?
yeah, like what do you mean by that? That like we all have a penis? Like that doesn't. I don't
So I
want to.
mean, yeah,
That's
yeah.
not
So
going to
that's like
determine
that's
if
like
I'm friends with someone or not. Like I don't.
no, yeah, oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's like some surface level stuff, but from like a biological perspective, right? We're gonna share a lot more than we share with women, right? So it's like
I
if
think it
we,
depends. I mean, maybe I'm being too. Not maybe I'm not being very agreeable, but I
no,
mean,
yeah, you're good.
I
This no,
feel as
I
though
like
there are like I don't know. I do recognize, of course, the importance of men being friends with men. I can definitely see that. But a lot of what you're talking about, like encourage to bring out the best in yourself and everything, like that should absolutely be something that is encouraged and taught and reinforced in men. But again, that should also be reinforced in women.
for sure, and I mean that's the thing. Like I'm gonna like as a question, like where do you think we can draw the line, like for men and women, obviously because they're different,
I don't know if we
and
need to draw a line.
between men and women.
Like, I don't know what
So what do you
you
mean,
mean
like?
by that. This is kind of the breakdown of the whole gender thing. Like, what does it really mean to be a woman? What does it really mean to be a man? It's a lot more than just what's between your legs. It's a whole
For sure.
slew of social expectations and social roles and the way that you're raised and the way that you're taught to think about things. Um, so I don't know. Like, I don't know why that line would be that important. I mean, of course, if we're talking about things like sports, I mean, some people call me transphobic when it comes to the trans sports issue, but when it comes to that, like if obviously biological males are going to probably be stronger than biological females, so maybe you draw a line between the testosterone and estrogen levels for the sake of the sport.
But
I can understand where lines might be
so,
necessary, but
mhm.
generally, I don't know how like
So do
what
you think this?
gender roles should be applied based solely on being a man or a woman.
So what way do you think we can, I guess, like obviously these hormones, right? They're gonna have a huge effect on our like mental, I guess, what's it called? Like our mental development, right? So do you think that we need to sort of like, I guess, embrace those differences rather than, I guess, dismissing them?
I mean, I'm not trying to dismiss them. There's, of course, differences between having estrogen and having testosterone, but I just don't know what that would determine any further than that, or if in certain niche circumstances like sports, but like we're having a conversation more or less about broad gender roles, expectations, and what better expectations we could potentially give to men. And I think where we're having the disagreement here is that you seem a little bit hung up on the biological side of things, where I'm saying I don't really see why. Who cares? Like, for example, you could say, well, men are stronger, so they should be providers. Well, it doesn't take strength to be a provider all the time. And also, women should provide for their family also. Lastly, what does it mean to be a provider? Does it mean you just have to make money? Does it mean that can you be emotionally providing for your family? Can you be providing in other ways for your family? Like, there's so much more nuance here. I'm not sure why we need to make expectations on the basis of like gender or on the basis of biology. I think that better thing is just encourage people to be good, decent human beings, set up a way in which we have determined it's good to be, this is a way to be a decent human being, and then go from there. I don't know if it needs to be divided between men and women.
But so like what I'm saying is, right, don't you think that men and women are going to respond to these, I guess, ways to be good and how to maximize their goodness in different ways, right? Just because I guess of their preferences and these things that are stemming from, I guess, obviously their biological makeup, how is it on like how they were raised plays it. Um, do you think that there should be a difference in the ways that we embrace goodness? Is what I'm saying.
There could be, but again, I hate to sound like a broken record. I'm not trying to just sound like I'm repeating myself,
No,
but
yeah,
like
you're good. You're good.
I feel as though again that doesn't need to be on the basis of gender. So I'll give you an example. It's generally accepted that males are a little bit better with like a hands-on approach, whereas females are sometimes better with like audible learning, right?
Yeah.
Which is true on an average, but again, that doesn't mean that that is going to be the case. And in cases like that, like there might be different ways to teach people things, but again, it sounds like that doesn't need to be on the basis of gender. It just sounds like it needs to be on the basis of what you're better at absorbing. Like if for me, I'm like if I write stuff down, I tend to
Oh, for
remember it
sure.
a lot better.
Yeah,
But I don't think
yeah,
that's like
yeah.
a man thing.
No, but like you said, like if we find like these observable differences on average, right? I'm not saying obviously there's going to be very interpersonal differences, um, but if we find these averages, sort of, and I guess embrace those averages, do you think that that would, I guess, help men grow? Because the thing is, another thing is like, right, these biological drives are kind of going to be there, um, but if we sort of tell like everyone to be a good human, do you think men and women are going to respond to that differently on the basis of their gender?
I don't know. The thing with the averages that I brought up is like I'm not sure how much that would determine. That might change like your approach as far as like educating people in regards to like academia, but the way that we generally treat people or these sort of socially constructed expectations and roles, I don't think that that needs to be built around gender. I really don't. Like, obviously, also, it'd be more than just like be a good human. It'd be like, what does it mean to be a good human? Be forgiving, be empathetic, be willing to accept critique. It's okay to show emotion if you're feeling sad or angry. You know, it's okay to let that out, but also make sure you're recognizing the situation and acting appropriately. You know, there's definitely times where it's not going to be appropriate to start having a fucking angry outburst, but there are other times where it's okay to just let those emotions out naturally and healthily. So I feel like that just easily applies, though, to men and women. I don't think that, like, you keep going back to biology and biology drives this, biology drives that, but I don't actually know what biology drives. What is
Yeah,
biology?
yeah, and no, but listen, yeah, and I will agree with you. But the thing is, like I'm asking, right? We're kind of in this like this weird point in society where we can't exactly test these things, right? We can't exactly observe these things because of, even if we did like the most perfect studies, right? These people would obviously still be growing up with, like you said, those social, I guess, um, social standards. And but do you think, like, right, if we, I guess, found a way to test it, those biological, I guess, barriers between men and women would lead to difference in response where we might be able to maximize, I guess, their understanding of these rules if there's a difference between them, you know?
Potentially, but that option sounds way more complicated and hard to reach. So, I mean, we'd have to first somehow get these perfect tests, somehow figure out exactly what biology is dictating in this thing or that thing, and then figure out how that's different between men and women, and then go accordingly. When I don't
Actually, I
know
think
what there
now that I think
is
about it, like,
exactly.
um, maybe your approach would actually kind of expose it, right? If we, I guess, right now, obviously, we have different standards for men and women. But if we kind of went along the same standard and kind of observed the fact if the genders responded differently, I guess, wouldn't that kind of be indicative or not, obviously. But if they,
Potentially, but also we have to think about why are the genders, quote unquote, describe or reacting differently, right? Like we don't know if that's biological. In fact, it's very likely that that is purely social. So, for example, I
Yeah,
think
but
I
what
brought
I'm
this up
saying
last time that like women are less likely to ask for a raise than men.
is,
Like, why is that? It's not because women are biologically don't want money.
no,
Like, it's
yeah.
because they're taught from a very early age that like, hey, you need to be like the good innocent little flower. You need to be agreeable. You need to be more accepting and okay with this, that, and the other thing. And it's a lot of subtle education that sort of plays a role, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, I was saying like if we sort of moved away from those standards, right, and started teaching, I guess, a standard of equalness, I guess you could say, like, or not a standard of equalness, but equalness as to men and women, the standard would apply to. Um, and then I guess if we saw men and women, obviously we don't know what would happen, right, because we don't live like that. But say we started doing what you were saying, where we kind of treated both genders equally. Um, do you think so? You see, this is kind of like where it goes into the realm of the unknown, right? We don't really
I don't
know
think it
what would
needs to
happen.
go that far in the realm of unknown. Like, it's pretty obvious that social roles play a massive, or have a massive
Oh no, I'm
effect
not.
on
Oh
people
yeah,
and their
for sure. I'm
well-being.
not
So,
disagreeing with that fact, but
I,
I'm
I
saying
just,
like,
I feel like we're going. I know we're kind of going in circles. I'm not trying
yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah.
so I'm not trying to
No,
sound
no,
rude or
I
anything.
understand. I
But
understand.
it seems as though there's not really much value in determining all these like possible differences between biology. Like, why? I don't know. Again, I don't know what that would really do. I don't know how that would benefit anything.
So you're saying, but I'm saying it's like if we are able to see these observable differences, wouldn't it be, I guess, worth it for the good of humanity to, I guess, embrace those differences and, I guess,
But the differences are amongst, there's differences between all people. I don't know how many differences exist necessarily between men and women
specifically
or
from
whatnot.
biology? Yeah, you see, okay, yeah,
Like,
I will
well,
admit.
let me, sorry, can I clarify? There are,
Go,
of
go.
course, differences, but the differences are very socially constructed, just to be clear. So, like, of
So you're
course,
saying,
there's a difference between men and women as far as society is that men are generally the ones wearing suits, women are generally the ones wearing dresses, but that's all social. It's not like a biological thing.
mhm. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, um, I'm not denying the fact that there are these social drivers, but say we eliminated those social drivers and treated them equally. And you see, this is kind of like diving into the realm of the unknown. I will do some research after this. I am curious to see if there has been any studies done on something like this, where I guess there was a neutral, like not exactly, I guess, imposing those kinds of norms.
It's going to be really hard to find that because there's
Yeah,
norms.
yeah,
I
I
mean,
know what you're saying.
everybody is a result of their environment, right? Like, I am literally a product of the environment in which I was raised. The norms have been instilled in me without my knowledge entirely. Like, you're
Yeah, yeah. Some of these things are obviously subconscious at this point.
exactly, yeah. And also, that's another thing is that's passed down, right? So, like, a man in the 80s may have been raised in even with even stricter, an even stricter of view of masculinity, right? They might have been taught much more like you're a fucking weakling little woman if you cry, this, that, and the other thing. And then that guy has kids, and maybe he's a little softer, but he still has those types of ideas, which are then instilled in his son, and it kind of just goes and goes and goes. So
Mhm.
that's
So
why
let
I
me
think
ask you
that
a question. Why do you think men are so prone to failing, I guess, today rather than, I guess, like whatever, how many years ago when it was these things weren't exactly like affecting men, like issues like drugs, alcohol, I guess, suicide. Um, why do you think like obviously there's do you think there's a leniency? Um,
what was the first part of your
not
question?
so like 20, 30 years ago, right? Do you think like these same standards were in place? Like I guess telling men be strong, be whatever.
Oh yeah.
Like you
Oh,
said.
absolutely, yes.
So why do you think today men are killing themselves in like everyone is I guess really killing themselves, being depressed in these higher rates than before?
Hmm.
If we have these same standards, like why do you think today specifically in our modern era are these sort of things happening?
I think that a lot of the problems already existed, like male loneliness and whatnot, but I think that the internet heavily exacerbated it. So, like, of course, back in the 80s, you might have had guys that were lonely, sure, but then you also had a lot more emphasis on being with your friends, going out and doing things, where now a lot of this is just like
Oh yeah,
it's
I
on the
will
internet, or
agree.
you.
Things like social media obviously exemplify these like loneliness and narcissism of people. Um, but I guess like another thing is like back then, I guess marriage was at a much higher rate. The rate of having kids was at a much higher rate. People were having more kids. People were staying committed to marriages. Divorce wasn't exactly as popularized, I guess, as it was today.
It kind of depends
Um,
what you're talking about, like what generation. Like the 80s, I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure divorce was still pretty normal. If you're talking about like way back before women had entirely equal rights, then there was a lot less divorce then because women were essentially unable to live their lives without a man because of the restrictive nature of the country.
mhm. No, but I'm saying like, and I guess like divorce rates is a little bit separate, but like marriage rates as well, we see are going down like heavily as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. And part of that's because of the internet. Part of that is because of economic issues. Part of
okay,
that's
so you're saying these are like outside factors that aren't exactly coming from these social norms. These social norms have always been there in a way.
I mean, the obviously the expectation that like you're a man, you need to be strong, you shouldn't cry, like that's existed for a pretty long time. I mean, even back in ancient times, right? Like it was always the men who were expected to
Oh, for
fight.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so that there's a lot of that there. I don't know when exactly it started or when exactly it changed, but as far as like the marriage thing, yeah, there's a whole slew of reasons there. I don't think that I would attribute the lower marriage rate to toxic masculinity. That seems to be more in the line of socioeconomic circumstances.
Okay. And is there, I guess, what's it called? You say like this topic of like toxic masculinity. So would you say like, I guess I don't even know, like the opposite of toxic masculinity? Would that be a society that is equally, I guess, just calling people humans? I guess, like you said.
Equally toxic. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think that a much better fix to all of this is to just stop putting this heavy emphasis on like you're a man, this is how you act. You're a woman, so this is how you act. But rather like there are ways that we all can agree are like how you should be a good human.
Hmm.
And if there needs to be a specific standard that is let's like if there's a specific standard based on gender that needs to be taught, then I think that that would really ultimately come down to the individual. Like, okay, this girl is having a hard time not being shy. How do we address that? That doesn't mean all women are suddenly shy. Like,
Oh, for sure. I'm
I
not.
think
Yeah,
that
like I don't.
I just think the way that we go about
It's
fixing it is getting rid of this emphasis on like you're a man, so this is how you act. You're a woman, so this is how you act, and rather just really just trying to instill values in people, which is be a good human. I know for me, like, you know that I'm a dad and I have a daughter, and like I'm not gonna let my kids say stuff like, "Oh, you throw like a girl," like little things, little subtle things like that. Like, there's nothing wrong with throwing like a girl. Stop assuming that throwing like a girl means it's weak or means that this is somehow a bad thing. Like little stuff like that. I'm gonna try to keep my kids from saying, and if I do hear them say that, which I'm sure there's going to be something like that that comes up eventually, I'll say, hey, there's nothing about throwing like a girl that is bad. It doesn't mean women are weaker. It doesn't mean that women can't throw as well as men. Like it's kind of up to the individual there. Believe me, there are plenty of women who can throw way better than I can.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm not denying that fact, but I guess like we have to go based on averages again, right? Now, this is kind of like separate to what we were just talking about. It is a little bit of tangent again. I don't want to keep going on tangents.
It's okay. We should start wrapping up the combo here
Yeah,
just a little
yeah,
bit.
for sure. Yeah, yeah. Um, but I guess like on average, right? They're saying these things. On average, yeah, men are going to be able to throw better than women, obviously, because they have, I guess, more muscle mass. Like this is again a biological argument.
I
I
don't think that
understand where
that's
you're coming
actually
from.
that biological. Like men are stronger, so they might be able to throw further or something. But like generally speaking, when it comes to how to throw a ball, like that's taught, right?
Yeah, I guess, but it is.
And
It is taught, right?
how many
But you
kids
need
grow up where
to.
their dad teaches them, or how many boys grow up where their dad teaches them to throw, and that's just not something that's taught to the girls. The girls might be
Yeah,
with
but think about it,
mom
right? So,
learning how to cook in the kitchen. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, mind you. There's nothing wrong with cooking in the kitchen, and there's nothing wrong with throwing the ball, but it's the separation based on gender that needs to go.
Hmm. But don't you think, like, so again, we can't, I guess, really observe this with kids. But say like the boy enjoys throwing the ball more and the girl enjoys cooking more. Now, yeah, and I see what you're saying, like why that's okay.
That's fine. But there's also going to be circumstances, right, where it's
Oh
actually
yeah,
the
for
girl
sure.
enjoys
Oh yeah,
going out and
and
playing sports. The girl enjoys doing stuff that's more
yeah,
sporty,
yeah.
and maybe
But
the
don't you
boy
think,
enjoys cooking. I mean, there's a lot of
but on
professional chefs out there
average,
that are men, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But like on average is what I'm saying. Like more like on a broader perspective, don't you think more boys, I guess, are going to enjoy playing sports because they're able to, like, I guess, be good at it from a biological perspective.
I don't
Um,
know. I honestly I don't agree with that. It's true that men being
yeah.
stronger might have the ability in like their adult years to go further in some sports, but there's also women's sports that are very successful, and there's
Oh yeah, but
very
I'm saying
athletic
like,
women, and
oh
I
yeah, for
just
sure.
I don't
But
think
okay,
that
okay,
separation needs to be there.
like between men and women's sports.
Oh no, no. There, of course, there needs to be a separation there.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean the separation on these expectations on
yeah.
people.
But I'm
Like,
saying like, right, but okay, but like to give an example, right? We are, I guess, in a time and place where we can offer these things to both boys and girls, right? We have men and women's teams, um, right? But men, I guess, all the mainstream sports, I guess, are so much more hyper competitive just because there's more men wanting to play those sports, right? There's such a like competition, I guess, more of an interest specific competition when it comes to men to
potentially,
do these
but
things.
that's largely social, right? That's not like it's not like man has testosterone therefore wants to play football. It's
But
like
I think,
we
but I
are on
think it's
average
a
stronger.
driver in a way.
Well, think about it back in the olden days, right? It was like men were way more likely to go off and, I don't know, fight in war, do the heavy labor kind of shit. Like that was them using their testosterone or their biology differences for that
So,
purpose, and now
can I
they
ask you
use
a
them
question?
differently. Like it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm saying like, oh yeah, for sure. What's up?
You good? Oh, I think he muted himself.
All right, I apologize. I'm back.
No worries. I was just gonna say really quick that like
Yeah, yeah.
men are encouraged to play sports far more than women. This is not a natural thing.
To like play sports, you mean?
Yeah, like the only natural thing here is that men on average have more testosterone than women. How you use that testosterone or what you do with that
Oh, like,
biology is completely up to social roles at that point.
mhm. But don't you think? Okay, so let me. Okay. Never mind. Actually, I'm not gonna go there. That'll be too much of a debate. Um, you want to wrap this up here? We
Yeah, sure.
can.
If you'd like
Okay.
to. I mean I always
Yeah.
enjoy
I was.
talking with you. I can tell you've
No. Yeah.
I can tell you put a lot of thought into this stuff. So, you know,
Mhm.
I think
No.
that's why the
Yeah.
combos we have are a lot more productive than, you know, some
Mhm.
people who just jump on here to yell at me.
Yeah. No, it's
So
like that's the thing. I love always questioning and I guess challenging my ideas. I think it's important um, to at least experience some kind of growth, you know.
yeah.
So it's like it's important stuff. But I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on your stream. I guess.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for jumping on. I appreciate it, and hopefully we can talk some more later.
No, for sure, bro. Have a nice day, man. See ya.
See ya. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click the bell so you get notified when I drop a new video.